That consultant that the station paid for still tells me that if I would make more eye contact with the camera, that I would appear to be more of a professional. He never did say a professional what. Where's that ransom money I asked for on Monday, by the way? You realize we didn't get one single letter? Not a penny. Okay, what we're talking about, still trying to get into, is how man is the ultimate self-referral machine and actually how that operates. That although I guess in this context I made up the use of it, the term, as I was pointing out, is quite applicable in other areas down so far as anything that's crude as an attorney or a floor furnace. That any machine that would qualify as being in any way smart has to refer back to itself. That in one sense, to stretch it further than ordinary technology, I guess, does, almost every machine, including internal combustion engines, you begin to see it, almost anything that man has made, in a sense, operates on some basis of having to refer back to itself. I was hoping to get it a little more, for you to see a little more specifically of what we were talking about. And one thing, taking the kind of description we have used of the primary and secondary world for the sake of verbalizing them as though they could be separate. But if you can see it in a certain way, you can see that the self-referral mechanism in the primary world would be used, for instance, with animals, if you want to take that right quick, within the primary aspect of man. But you would see that in all the primary world, self-reference is for the sake of keeping things as they are, to keep things stable. And in the secondary, it is, as people like to say, just the opposite. You do understand that at the primary level, or if you need to take an animal to start with, and it's true throughout life on this planet, but take an animal, take the primary, as crude psychology might want to call it, your animal aspect, just the physical side of man, if we could separate it. The self-referral mechanism is to keep things as they are. The self-reference, the homeostatic nature, sensual creatures on this planet, a dog, the self-referral nature is to keep the animal as it is. That's just it. When you get into man's secondary, the intellectual secondary, the self-reference is to make things change, which sets up an interesting, from all ordinary views, and everyone's been there, at least on vacation. You remember that real tall building that was real squatty and lumpy? You know, you used to see it in the mirror, you know. And they let you go up there even though somebody may have said, well, it's closed for the night. But that's how it is in New York, in big cities. It sets up an interesting situation with ordinary people. It makes them feel somewhat in, what shall we say? I think they call it internal conflict. Like, I'm not sure what's going on. Or I feel a certain amount of ambiguity. They like to say that while never looking the word up. And I'm sick of it, just like you. But back to the specifics. Man's body, to put it that way, the primary level of man, uses self-reference to stay stable. Now, there can't be any great secret with that. That if you are just walking around sane, your stomach, the whole digestive tract, is set up, the whole operation, in such a way that you're supposed to eat enough, your stomach sends back the nonverbal message, enough. Then when you have to rid yourself of the leftovers, other parts of your system says, hey, let's take a break. It is to stay stable. It is to keep the body as it is. Taking into account, of course, you have to grow up physically and you become mature and all that. But in essence, if you see that at that level there is no question of interpretation, no one but a maniac would be trying to play his physical life as a jazz musician. You do not improvise. The self-reference is to keep that part stable, to keep it as it is. That's it. Now, you can, of course, exercise, and et cetera, but that's why health is really no fit hobby. If you are just already wired up sane, which we can't do anything about, can't change that, or I don't have time to help you with it. Plus, you don't have enough money, since you wouldn't contribute to the extortion fund anyway. If you are just sane, the self-reference of the primary world is to keep you as you are. There's nothing wrong with that. That is health. That's not a hobby. That is health. To stay as you are, to stay stable, is 70 years of reasonable health. But look, within that same frame, within that same system that is you, that is every man, there is an equal, to say the least, an equally active system using self-reference again, which is why people must talk about themselves. That's what opinions are for. That's what the whole operation of the intellect is about. That self-reference is to make change, not to stay stable. Thus, if you recall, there was a Kyroot a few nights ago that the primary once told the secondary, if it ain't broke, break it. That's it. Of course, the primary can't talk to the secondary that way, but that is vis-a-vis. The primary would be telling itself if it could talk, and it had heard the old rural adage about if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is the original. I say rural adage, it seemed to have finally slipped into the halls of Congress, which I guess is rural enough. But the primary, if it was going to use that and it had heard it and could talk, it would say, if it ain't broke, for God's sake, don't break it. It would, in fact, if your primary was that relatively sane, just ordinarily sane, and could talk, it would join in what I've told you. It would tell you, hey, I ain't no hobby. That is, health is no hobby. It would be saying, don't fool around. Don't go on a 2-gram oatmeal diet. Don't go on a fast. Don't try to live off lemonade. Don't try to stay up 17 days in a row and talk to a rock. Don't drive nails in your hand and think it'll make you become a religious carpenter. In other words, the body, what ordinary people would call the body. If it was going to use this term, that is what we're calling the primary, it would say, if it ain't broke, don't screw with it. Not only don't try to fix it, just don't even fool with it. If you ain't broke, don't be saying, wait a minute, and telling people, calm down, wait a minute. They're fixing to have one of those health reports on the radio. I want to hear it. Obvious joke, or it used to be, is like, you want to pick up the latest disease or see, perhaps I do have the symptom. It's something brand new. Maybe you'll be the first man to actually have PMS. Your primary would be telling you, if it ain't broke, don't fool with me. Because the whole purpose of self-reference at that level is to stay, assuming again that you're relatively sane and healthy, is to stay stable. It's to stay as you are. But the little picture from the Kyroot, when you get into the secondary, you can't do that. The secondary would not even be alive. Surely you follow. You don't have to be any more healthy, let's say, than people in Macedonia did 3,000 years ago. But if you, using you as being indicative of the world population, the middle of the bell curve of life now, if you, in the secondary intellectual sense, were no better off than they were 3,000 years ago, we would be in worse shape than some people think we are. In other words, it would not do. So even though I'm aware of the fact that the lifespan is increased and we're taller and etc. Basically, the primary has not changed that much. Men still have 2 arms, 2 legs, and etc. That has not been the change. It's not even the technology has made the change, unless you understand that man's body did not create the technology. The secondary created the technology. So for all operational purposes, for as much as it concerns one man in his lifetime, in that sense, the change that has taken place at the primary level over 3,000 years or 5,000 years is of no consequence. Not you in your lifetime, it doesn't matter. This matters. The body is still stable, relatively, even though I know it's changed a little. That is the lifespan, etc., as we said. But it is basically as it is. That you would recognize physically anybody on this planet, if they popped up, or if you were put back in history 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, you would recognize them. But if we split up right quick and you were simply a walking around secondary in intellect, you would be less at home. You would feel less secure if you were confronted with the minds of the secondary life of people of 5,000 years ago. May I suggest you would probably be looking for a bus, or you'd be looking for H.G. Wells to get you the hell out of there and back here. Well, all of you, I assume, know that, because you don't have to talk about 5,000 years. There are places around the Gulf area of Louisiana that make you wish you were back in the 21st century up here. That is in the secondary. There is set up an interesting situation, as I started to mention, of having this going on inside of each person. That you have that man, the energy machine, which is a fine description of what you are, is set up and based upon self-reference. If you do not have self-reference, you're alive. If you do not have self-reference, you're in a coma. If your body is still alive. What ordinary people would call consciousness, or being just consciousness, is an aspect. It is a crude description of the self-reference. Because ordinary people just turn consciousness to here. That's not the point. But self-reference is what makes you human. You could be a vegetable. You could be laying there in a coma and live out another 30 or 40 years, and your body, under certain conditions that you would not necessarily have to be plugged into all sorts of life support machinery. At any rate, you could be physically surviving, and it'd just be your primary self-reference. But if you're not engaged in self-reference at this level, you are not human. You could be an alive piece of flesh laying there in a bed, but you are not human. But the interesting situation I was going to propose is that inside of each person is this self-referring machinery. And what it amounts to have these two going on, and one of them, the primary, is above all things is seeking shelter, seeking cover. And in one sense, right inside of equal importance, to say the least, you've got the secondary that's almost hollering out, hey, let's take off our clothes and run out and play in the lightning. And so you have people constantly writing, thinking, proposing, conjuring, philosophizing, whining, attacking one another. And of course you can forget all that as being an external sociological observation and look inside of how people seem to be uncertain, filled with ambiguity, still, ambiguities, certain hostilities, certain fears, certain conflicting desires. Because above all, you have the body sanely, just real crudely, sanely wanting to stay in a safe harbor. And if you are still somewhere just in the middle of life, middle class, not enough to do you harm, but you have right in you a higher end of the nervous system hollering, let's go out and run through traffic and see what happens. And I said, to say the least, that the secondary is of equal importance. If we start playing even at city level, inside the middle of the bell curve, where ordinary people are, it gets more and more progressive toward the secondary end. That is, the more that, even at the ordinary level, just out in life, the more you are at the cutting edge of city life, whatever that might be, you have a predominance of the secondary. That men and men are more intellectual. Men and men, not enough to hurt themselves. So you got to remember the balance. Well, you got to remember the balance. But there are more and more people that will sit around and speculate and try to think, what would it be if I could even mathematically come up with a general field theory to explain everything. He might discuss it with a few colleagues. In a sense, he is secondarily playing in traffic, but not enough to hurt himself physically. But if you get outside the street level, it takes on more interesting aspects, because you are attempting to stay sane, you are attempting to stay undercover and sheltered in a safe place. Not just physically, but here, because in the city they do too. They don't know it. Because if you don't, you become bonkers. And you're of no particular good to life, at least in the middle of the ordinary sane neighborhood. But a revolutionist has got to play, that's why I started out and got that great response. Now it's too late to apologize. Is to say that the internal situation is such that the primary, if it could talk, but what it's doing non-verbally is say, well, let's seek shelter. It is all the time. There's nothing wrong. It doesn't mean that you're a wimp. It just shows that you're sane. That the primary wants to stay where it's safe. Get in out of the cold. Well, who needs it? It's only the real fringe that believe that they're going to in some way help the secondary by doing the opposite. In case you never thought about it that way, it's only those that are not part of, shall we say, life's respectable middle class who decide what I'm going to do is increase my thinking capacity. I know they call it things like I'm going to expand my soul, I'm going to increase my consciousness by going way up in the mountains, far from home, and take off my clothes and sit in the snow. Or I will, in fact, drive nails into my more sensitive parts. And that way, my mind will expand. You do know that people like that are not presidents of universities. They're not prime ministers of countries, except one I can think about and I don't want to mention. They do not get jobs of responsibility like driving buses. Amongst themselves, they think, wow, do you know that so-and-so not only sat in the snow until he lost a foot, he lost 2 feet. And people think, wow, maybe by now he must be a spiritual teacher. We'll go look him back up. No. Right down the middle, just being as healthy and as sane as you can, the primary is seeking shelter. That's the only sane thing to do. But the more you are attempting to do whatever this is, the more that you are somewhat less than absolutely armored by contemporary times in you, not out there, but in you, then the more you have the situation that you have your own nervous system, you have the secondary, not in battle, it's not that it's trying to argue, but you have it simultaneously saying, let's get the hell out of here. Let's run naked out in the lightning. And it's not, because then your secondary would be insane. It's not that your secondary is telling the primary, well, hey, we shouldn't stay safe. Because you're doing that, you're bonkers again, just in, I'll admit, a somewhat more complex way, if that helps. In other words, they put you away and the diagnosis is, takes up 1 line. Then if you do it this way, if you get crazy in the secondary also, maybe it takes up 2 lines. If that makes you feel better, some of the other inmates might finally begin to think, he's something special. We're just crazy to X him out. That man is super crazy. So, for those of you who still like to rise above your peers, it's mind-boggling. But I would advise at your age you should not be boggling your mind. Most of you are grown boys and girls, and you should stop that. What you have going on, don't let me leave it too confused. With ordinary people, this is not just a revolution in this matter. In ordinary people, in ordinary sane people, you have the primary aspect of their life, the primary aspect of life on this planet. But in people, you have the primary, properly, wisely seeking shelter, comfort. That's it. But you also have in them, and it's always you could call it a varying mix. You could say that's one thing that makes people apparently be different from one another. But you have in there their secondary saying, come on. Let's jump off the top step. Of course, then it gets into things that apparently have nothing to do with the expansion of one's intellect or consciousness, but it's doing that which may not serve the best interest of the primary, such as a guy thinks, I think I will pick up that waitress. And this is getting sticky. You got to listen, though, because this is sticky. And he says, my wife won't catch me this time, whereas she always catches him. And this time she may divorce him and take everything he's got, and he end up homeless. Now this is very convoluted, but so what? Do you understand that he could, by saying, well, nobody will ever know. So instead of jumping off the top step, or instead of taking up skydiving at the age of 65, while you're 300 pounds overweight, the sense of adventure is, I'll see if I get caught. And it's almost a certainty he'll get caught. It may take a few months and some attorney fees and going through our judicial system, but he ends up divorced, ends up stripped of everything he has, and it has now become primarily unprofitable to him. He now no longer has a house. He does not have a good place to stay. He's lost his job. He's losing weight. He's not eating well. Do you see? And it's only because, in one sense, it started out to be a kind of, it turned out to be, you might say, unhealthy in his case, but it started out to be not an untoward situation, because it is valid and operational in everyone already. That you have the primary, using self-reference, to try and stay as it is, because it does not need anything other than what it has, if it's seen. And you have, to varying degrees, that kind of mix. You have the secondary saying, nobody's looking. Let's try it. That's the ordinary. That is growth. That is change at the ordinary level. It then becomes, I'm going to call it trickier. I guess it's no big deal. It can just sound like, boy, something new and exciting, but it is trickier. To try and do it where it is meaningful in one person's lifetime, that you have to be able to, I just mean this, of course symbolically, but you have to be able to, in the secondary sense, do something that is walking the thin line of being unprofitable, kind of supervised internal chaos. You have to, at the secondary level, almost be able to go out and run naked through the lightning and not get hit. It's only ordinary people believe that they might hear something like that and go, I get the metaphorical suggestion. Teach me how to do it. It's only ordinary people think somebody can teach you how to do it. How can you teach somebody to run naked through the lightning and not get killed? To begin with, if somebody asks you, teach me how to do that, to begin with, they got no business doing it, because they're ordinary. And all they're wanting to do is get hit by lightning. Maybe not killed, but at least hit, so they can come back and complain to you, or if they can't find you, they complain to everybody else the rest of their life. Or maybe it fries, part of their body parts off. But the thing is, if somebody has to ask you, which if you want to look back at religion and philosophy, it's the very people that show up and say, hey, what I want to do is do something new and exciting and mysterious, teach me. Those people either are going nowhere or they're going to get hit by lightning. You can't be taught. That's why it's tricky. Because if you hurt yourself, you're not doing it right. And that sounds very unexciting, but I hate to stop again. But notice, throughout history, you don't have to be religious, or you don't have to be of any particular religious persuasion. But people believe if I'm not getting hurt, I'm not getting better. And at a fairly innocuous level, people, in a gym, which seems to be sane enough, no pain, no gain. But all you got to do is expand that a little bit. And what is it that people believe throughout history? If there is the possibility of some kind of supernatural, supernormal way to expand my consciousness, my soul, my intellect, God, let's see. Of course, there are books. It won't take you long to find a book that says, drive staples through your tongue. Of course, while chanting so-and-so, or while trying to picture what the all-encompassing general field theory would be in subatomic particles if it had a face and had staples driven through its tongue. So do it simultaneously. I know you think I'm being silly, but look, life is full of the serious people. The people running the world will proudly admit that they pursue some sort of regimen, their religion that requires, well, I do not eat dairy products on Tuesday, or I will not wear socks on Saturday, I will not speak to anyone during the month of February, I will lay down in the sand. It's all on the basis that if I am in not some way, that wasn't an exaggeration, as some of you know, because some of you used to do that stuff. But it's all on the basis that they don't look at it this way, but it's on the basis if I am not in some way making my primary pay a price, which Kyroot pointed out tonight, for those of you that didn't get this, ultimately, whatever debts you run up, primary is going to pay for them. You can't drive yourself crazy up here and think, well, at least I didn't hurt myself. It's always a feeling. It can be, as I said, relatively harmless, such as if you decide you wanted to build big muscles, you got to tear down some of the present wimpy muscles. You got to hurt yourself a little. But then it gets into other areas, and people do not notice it, or they don't define it this way. But the thing is, I am not doing anything. I'm not growing spiritually. I'm not growing as a person. I'm not growing psychologically, unless there's a certain amount of discomfort. It can't be a certain amount of discomfort at the primary level, or you're not doing it right. Then if you get really good, Kyroot just fortuitously pointed out tonight that if a revolutionist solves a secondary problem and the solution is not pleasant, it wasn't a solution. Nobody wants to hear that. Well, some of you laugh, but can you imagine taking all churches as being as serious as anything else in the world, like shoe repairs and interstate bus commerce? But who would want to go into a religion, or go back to your old religion, go into one that you think is impressive already, that has some kind of standing and some kind of tentacles into the ordinary world? Part of it is to go into them, and they say, and their teaching somewhere amounts to this of, well, nobody in life is satisfied. And you say, well, that's me, so I'm in the right place. And so we're all interested in that. That's why we get together and build all these things. And you go, well, I'm glad I'm here. And then they tell you, well, we got some suggestions of things some people said they found. I don't really know. I can tell them to. We wrote them down here on a piece of paper. But the main thing is this. We don't really have a teaching or anything. Oh, well, I guess you'll call us a teaching. We only have one idea that we collectively support, and that is, don't do anything to hurt yourself. Well, first you can go, well, that sounds fine. But it ain't fine. The institutions of life will not operate on that basis, because the mind of man at the ordinary level will not operate on that basis. Now, rather than hurt yourself, you could say, well, some expense. Because if you're really sharp and you're ordinary, you could start using this back on me and say, wait a minute, in a polarized world, if you're going to shift your weight from your right foot, it's going to have to go somewhere. Well, I'll give it to my brother. You're being a nut. If you're going to take some of the weight off your right foot, where does it go? Sandusky? No. My left foot. See? And then they could do it to me. Aha, we got you. Because everything's got a price. Don't you love little picturizations that just clear everything up? Are we going to say that like an atomic blast clears things up? Well, it's brighter in here for a second at least. In case you lost your keys there on the desert. And it's late at night at least. At least this form of enlightenment, like putting off an atomic device, you've got a split second to find them, because they'll be real bright. No, I'm glad I could be of service. Back to what I was saying. All the way from, I was trying to make it plain enough. If you're going to get out and run, if you're going to try to do something to make yourself healthier, or go to the gym, you understand that everybody's heard the current term, no pain, no gain. You know that, well, it's cost me something. If it didn't really cost my muscles aching, they charge me to come there. Well, I'm going to be healthier. I eat too much and I'm overweight. And so they charge you to come there and they say, well, you're overweight. And it's on sale this week, though. It's only $19 instead of $29. Whatever it is in life, if there's any improvement, there's a cost. I was calling it some sort of pain, hurting yourself. And it doesn't have to be physically, but then note, you go into areas that appear to be much more esoteric. Religion. All religions look at it as being the great comforter. They attempt to be the big, decent, great adult, look after all the children, the institution. We'll all get together and try to be decent, more humane people. But everything that you do there, and it's not the fault of any religion particularly, it's just the nature of life. If you're going to benefit, you have to be hurt. You have to assume, well, it's going to pain me. Because they'll ask, well, whatever the religion is, do you do so-and-so? No, do you do so-and-so? They'll keep on until they hit something. It doesn't take much. 10 Commandments is way too many, you know that. But, if they say, well, are you on hard drugs? Oh, no, sir. Do you drink? Oh, no. It would take 2 or 3 questions, and they're finally going to say, well, yeah, that. And they go, well, at least it wasn't one of the bad ones, but, you're going to have to stop that. And you go, I knew that. I knew it. In fact, I'm glad I'm here because probably being around you guys, it'll help me stop. People accept whether you hurt yourself. Hurting yourself. Here don't love on the ordinary. You can't tell an ordinary person. If you had some neighbor, if the bus driver, you're on your way back to Alabama for the weekend, and the guy's flying along, you think he's going rather fast and driving somewhat erratically, and suddenly he gets on, do they still have little mics on buses, and he says, does anybody on this bus have any opinion, do you think I should quit taking cocaine? Under those conditions, any of us might go, yes. Many of us back here, we just suddenly, now that you mentioned it, we wish you would stop. Either stop cocaine or maybe stop the bus for a second. I've got to step out for. So, as we all know, but the point is, insofar as an ordinary person saying, should I stop using cocaine or taking drugs? It doesn't matter. They may stop, they may not. It's got nothing to do. Well, let me be technical for a second. It's got nothing to do with nothing. Okay. I hate to get real scientific about it. But a revolutionist, if you were trying to do something in your lifetime, and as you know, life shows it already, that it is not to life's best interest in man, the self-referring energy machine, for large numbers of people to be constantly on what's known as drugs, cocaine. So life takes care of that. And it has those who are on cocaine. Doing what? Half the time, if they're doing cocaine 12 hours a day, the other 12 they're doing what? Saying, I got to stop. So life's looking after itself. But in one guy's lifetime, trying to change, you got no business doing anything to hurt yourself. Whatever it would be. And I don't mean cocaine. I mean doing that which is secondarily irrelevant. Such as, well, let's see, I could think of some examples. How about one? Being serious. No. Taking what life seems to be serious. No. Doing something that is institutionally directive as being, that is collective thinking, that would be to my benefit. No. Are they wrong? No. leaving on a clear note since the tape's out. I'll leave you on that clear note.
And for the locally in-person assemblage, Kyroot repeats one he wanted to be sure was clear to the in-person locally assembled, to wit. When it comes to thinking about, talking about, and predicting the future of man, you do not have to be a pessimist to prove you know nothing. Just serious.
Yep. That was also, I put assembly of a few people out of town. We are on, right? Where's the light? Okay. You sure it was on?
Yes.
Okay. A few people out of town, hello, I want to be sure you got that. Because that was a concluding one, I think, the other night. It didn't seem to be that clear, but just think of it in your own head and what you hear in life. Because everyone, they don't have to call themselves a soothsayer, but everyone is continually predicting the nature of man. Just to the fact that they train their kid. You know, you keep doing that, you're going to put your eye out. You don't have to be a pessimist. You don't have to just do that to prove that you're a dunderhead, that you're ordinary. Because everyone's predicting the future of man. Everyone's nervous system, just right below the level where it bubbles and talks, which is, it drifts up and down. Is all you got to do. If you're ordinary, is hear somebody holler, oh, these are perilous times in which we live, my friends. And your nervous system goes, right along with it. But you don't have to look. See, I keep doing that. But at least any of you think, well, I got that down. Yeah, now that you mention it, and I keep looking, people are always more or less predicting the end of the world, the greenhouse effect, the devil will get you. Lawrence Welk may make a comeback. You know, something terrible is going to happen. You don't have to just do that to prove that you don't know anything, you or anybody else. All you got to do, when you think about the nature of life, the future, of what's coming up, you, but especially life, the next generations, you don't have to be just a pessimist to prove that you don't know shit. All you got to do is be serious. The future. You know, my future may not amount to anything. Oh, hell, you know, Jesus, I'm nearly 30 years old. Maybe I'll never get famous. But the future generations, we must look after them. You know, who's going to ever pop up to somebody that says that and go, come off of it? They're going to lynch you. But you're doing it to your own generation. It's your own people that look all dressed up in ties. And, well, I don't worry so much about myself. But my God, we have got to look after this planet. We have got to look after the environment. Because the future is all our children have. You don't have to give that man an IQ test. He could be the president of Harvard. But don't bother to give him an IQ test. Go by that method that other planet used, body odor. Remember? All you got to do is smell, and that son of a bitch is serious. He smells serious. That was not what I wanted to do, was point out right quick, especially out of town and here. The thing about trying to get our tapes on more stations and get people to showing up at the groups out there, one more time, is not, surely all of you know, is not simply or not even based upon making me famous or this famous, but the thing is, I wanted to point out to you again, without me having to rag everybody and stay on you, it's to your benefit now. If it did, if things worked in such a way, let's say while I'm still alive, that this started getting popular in some more public way. Now, I'm not predicting. You ain't going to catch me with that shit. I just pull that. But if it did, the point is, it's not that me that would benefit, and it's not that the people, some public, just started getting publicly popular, it's not that they would benefit. All right, they would. The real benefit would be you people. That's what I just wanted to point out. And that's not as, what do they call it, awards? What do they call it they give out to companies if you sell a lot? Not awards, what do they call them? Yeah, and plus there's something else. My mind just went. Incentives and what else?
Perks?
No. Incentive, you know what I mean. I wasn't trying to hold out an in-company incentive. But I did want to point out, since I was trying to leave it to you people, look after your own best interest. Decide what's your own best interest on the basis that, if you had more people in other cities, maybe at the very least you'd think that at least I wouldn't be threatening to cut you off. But look at it another way. I'm telling you a fact. And I've about ranged it. See, if it doesn't happen now, when I say it's to your benefit, it's got more popular, it needs to happen now because the way things normally work, if you want to look at it another way, I've already made certain arrangements or tried to subtly with a few people here to try and stop it. But it'd be a different story if I dropped dead, and I'm still not predicting, but if I dropped dead and then all this, the tapes and all the Kyroots and everything, and then it got popular, it wouldn't be the same thing. I'll put it to you another way. Symbolism time, da-dun-da-dum. After Muhammad died, the first caliph, it almost drove him crazy. Did you follow that? Was that too obscure? In other words, it's something like this, and I'm not comparing it either way, I'm just symbolism. Remember, look up symbolism. It's not even like a metaphor, it's not a simile. I'm not saying is it. Try something closer to home. After Jesus died, then it got popular. Still symbolism. After Jesus died, and then it got popular, the popularity almost drove, what was his name? Paul, was it Paul or Peter, whoever it was, drove him nuts. You remember? He decided, you shouldn't fuck, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't, he began to hallucinate. I just wanted to point, I'm still not predicting anything serious because if I drop dead and this gets popular, I've tried to at least fix it up enough that the rest of you wouldn't be driven crazy. But it ain't the same. But I'll admit to you, that's the way it normally goes. But just remember, even if it didn't make any sense, I thought it did. But once Jesus died, the popularity, once it goes the other way, almost drove St. Paul nuts. It ain't the same. Never has been the same. I mean, things going along Muhammad seemed to do, even in another sense, better than Jesus, and a bunch of them did. Remember, he had a whole bunch of wives and a lot of the world in his pocket. But then he died, and then it's like it takes on always a whole new thing. Then it becomes... And then what happens, though? You think, well, now we can really get into it and live off the fruits of the land and take advantage of... It's really getting popular because now he's dead, and I ain't going into why. But then it's like, boy, this can really take off. Except those left that now take it seriously just about get driven nuts. You can try and think about it, but just remember, go back and read. You've got to know probably more. St. Paul. Oh boy, yes. The popularity can drive you absolutely bonkers. That wasn't the point, was it? I just got carried away. It's to your benefit now. And I can't resist. How soon do they get this stuff in New York? Well, huh? Okay, well, I had to tell you, I'm going to call anyway. Just so I walked over, come over the meeting, John K. brought me that box of CDs from New York. I almost had to call the meeting off. He made me open it before I got here. He said I should look at it. I just wanted to say to you, I guess I'll call New York. But, I was going to say that I looked at it and became so incoherent that I couldn't hold a meeting. It was stuff I'd been looking for. The people in New York found out. But then I thought, being incoherent wouldn't be much of a story to try to give somebody. That, to show my excitement that he became incoherent. Hey, that's your opinion. Then I thought, I should have said, he became speechless. I thought maybe that'd be more believable. Well, anyway, you're lucky because I almost canceled the meeting tonight. I just couldn't think of a good story. I was going to call in and say I'm sick.